Okay, go ahead when you're ready.
Sounds great. Thanks. I'm Matt Warnock. I'm the owner of Ridgecrest Herbals. We have been on Moqui for, well, since 2016 or thereabouts, I think. And I have known David for about 23 years or something. I think now. So, um, and today I want to talk about some things that I think can affect how we move forward with Moki, and I want to kind of initiate a discussion on that. Um, the things that we're going to talk about today are not just missing in Moki; they're missing in ERP systems generally. Most ERP systems, in my estimation, focus on a lot of the wrong things. They talk about order to cash. They talk about purchase to pay. They talk about reducing expenses and creating efficiency. And those are all good things, but they ignore the thing that every business absolutely depends on, and that is, where do the customers come from? Um, that may be a funny thing to talk about in the sense of an ERP, but an ERP is designed to cover the most mission critical elements of a business. And if we're not talking about sales and marketing, those are mission critical elements of a business that just aren't being discussed at all. Um, so why does it matter and who am I? I'm an Eagle Scout and a Scoutmaster for 30 years. Um, I tend to tilt at windmills a little bit, and you'll see some of that in this. I am a former lawyer and an MBA, and I have spent about the last 20 years mentoring businesses, mentoring startup businesses, and helping them get off the ground. I work with a nonprofit organization called Connect Capital, which has often been criticized as helping rich people get richer. But that's not actually what we do. We help entrepreneurs get money from rich people so that they can get rich. And entrepreneurs, 98% of them have never done it before. Most of them are poor as church mice. They have a great idea. They have a mousetrap. They have sunk a lot of their own resources into that and want to get it to the next level. They need capital to do that, and that's when they turn to us. We help them tell their story so that they can get capital, usually at very early stages, pre-Series A, and we help them get going. So why do we do that? Well, because those small businesses in America create most of the innovation. They create most of the jobs. They do great things for the economy, but most of them have an abysmal failure rate. And so one of the things that we focus on is helping them get off the ground. So about the same time I met David, I also fell in backwards into Ridgecrest Herbals. My dad had started that company back in 1994. He had gotten to a certain point in his life where he was kind of counting on this to be his vehicle for his retirement. Um, two things happened simultaneously. Number one, his partner, who was in charge of the sales for the business, developed Parkinson's disease, and my mom developed a disease that was expected to take her out in the course of about 18 to 24 months, they thought at the time. So both of them needed to kind of retire from the business. They brought me in on the operations side. They brought another company in to manage the sales. And over the course of 3 years working there part time, I watched the sales go from 1.5 million to 1.3 million to 1.1 million. And at that point, I went to Dad and I said, "Look, I can. I'm not in charge of the sales of this organization, and I can fine tune the operations all you want, but until we turn the sales around, nothing I do in terms of making us more efficient is going to matter." because the sales is dropping through the floor. My dad had a common saying where he said, a rising top line sales revenue covers all sins. And that's really true. If a business is growing fast, you can have all kinds of efficiencies and inefficiencies and nobody ever worries about it. But if it's not growing fast, it really doesn't matter. You have to worry a lot more about those inefficiencies. And if it's going down, you need to figure out where you're going to cut heads. So those are the facts of life of any business. And getting and keeping customers is hard, but it's also the fastest way to profit. And it's the fastest way that as a software company, you can show value. If you walk into a software sale, and believe me, I get these pitches every single day in my inbox. If you can go into a software sale and say, I can save you 10% on your shipping, I'll think about that. If they come in and say, I can double your sales, I'm going to pay a lot more attention to that. So let's talk a little bit about what I call the 7-line profit and loss statement. This is just the main categories that we deal with. And let's talk about why they're important. So the first one is gross revenue. That's basically your list price before your discounts. When you're sending out an invoice, the list price that those products are being sold at, or services, either one, is the gross revenue. There are discounts, returns, and allowances that are applied against that. The net of that is net revenue. That's the cash you actually get. From that, we subtract another group of expenses that are sometimes called variable costs. Now, in Moqui, and consistent with accounting practices, those are generally called cost of sales, and they include cost of goods sold and royalties and shipping expenses and things like that. Basically, anything that varies based on how many widgets you ship goes in that variable cost column. And the net of that from net revenue is called your gross margin. Now, the gross margin is often listed as a percentage of the net revenue. And that's an important number to kind of understand, because the gross margin percentage tells you how much of your net revenue is actually going to be contributed, which is why that gets another term called contribution margin, is going to be contributed toward meeting your fixed operating costs during that same period. So the operating costs are the fixed costs, or what Guru Dharam described as the burn rate. He was talking about it in the context of a company that doesn't have any revenue yet. But the burn rate is the advertising, the payroll, the overhead, all of the stuff that doesn't vary with the amount of goods that you ship in a particular month or quarter or period, whatever it is. So the burn rate is, one way to describe it is that's what determines the size of the pipe that you can put material through. If you increase your shipping department from 1 person to 2 people, you have doubled the number of shipments that you can ship. But the question is, how many are you actually going to ship? It doesn't make any difference how many you ship that month, because you've brought on that second person. You're going to be paying the same fixed amount for both of those salaries. And that's going to affect your net operating profit, or EBITDA. By the way, if you guys have questions on any of this stuff, just break right in and stop me. But so the things that I want to talk about here are a couple of observations. Number one, the fixed expenses don't increase with the volume. Typically, they increase in steps, like we just talked about. You bring on another person, you're paying another salary. It adds that amount to the size of the pipe. Your break even How long it takes you, how many widgets you have to sell in order to make a profit is determined by those fixed expenses. Your revenues are always variable. And in the long run, your fixed expenses are variable too. I mean, in theory, well, in the long run, we're all dead, so it doesn't matter, right? But your fixed expenses can be varied over time, but they don't vary with the amount of product or services that you're pushing out the door. So let's imagine that you are, for example, a retail store owner. Um, in a retail store, it's not uncommon, depending on what kind of store it is, but they often use a thing called Keystone. They take the wholesale price, they multiply it by two. That's their contribution margin. So their margin is 50% of the retail price in that setting. That means that in order to once they sell one unit, half of that is already gone in variable costs before it goes out the door. The other half can be applied toward the contribution margin is contribution margin, and so that can be applied toward the fixed operating expenses. Once you get above a certain point in once you reach break even, then all of that contribution margin essentially goes straight to the bottom line. It goes to profit. So we can increase our profits in one of two ways, basically, all the time. There are always two ways that you can increase your profits. One is by saving on fixed costs. But if we can increase sales, basically half of those sales in the situation we just described are going to drop to your bottom line. So when Guru Dharam was talking earlier about customer acquisition versus customer lifetime value, that's basically a break-even analysis. How much does it cost to get that customer on board? And then how many units do you have to sell to that customer over what period of time to make that customer break even for you, right? So break-even analysis is really important in any business. So as I said, I've been mentoring businesses for about 20 years now. And over the last probably 4 years or 3 years, there have been two tools that I have been universally recommending to every entrepreneur I talk to. One of them is a thing called the Entrepreneurial Operating System by Gino Wickman. That is a system that basically allows you to set goals and run meetings, align everybody's efforts so that you're all pushing in the same direction. The second one is a thing called the one-page marketing plan, or 1PMP. That's by a guy named Alan Dibb out of Australia. And the thing I like about this one is that it's a great 30,000-foot view of the entire sales process. Now, both of these systems are completely tech agnostic. You could implement them on index cards or in a binder if you wanted to. They could be done in Moqui. But of those two, the one-page marketing plan has a couple of distinct advantages, and that's why I want to talk about that one today. The first is that the entrepreneurial operating system probably doesn't have a lot of value to a solo entrepreneur coming out of the ground, as in the situation that Guru Dharam was talking about earlier. When you want to keep your overhead low, you don't have anybody to organize to row in the same direction. So those problems don't really exist yet. But as you grow, the entrepreneurial operating system will be important to you. And it certainly becomes a lot more important once you get past probably 4 or 5 employees. But the one-page marketing plan is the thing that allows you to not be the situation that Guru Dharam described, where you're a technology looking for a problem, or a solution looking for a problem, as we like to say in the angel business. If you can get customers to try your product early, give you feedback on it, ensure that you have a product market fit, that does two things. Number one, it starts getting some revenue in the door, which gives you a lot more runway with your existing capital. And secondly, it debugs your sales system so that you can see what customers are going for and what they aren't. So I'm going to spend some time talking about the one-page marketing plan. What I want you to do, if you have a piece of paper handy, just grab it and draw a great big tic-tac-toe. I'm sorry?
None of us have paper, Matt.
Yeah, these are all programmers. Okay, do it in your head then.
It's an online conference.
It is an online conference, and unfortunately, I'm suffering from a miserable cold this week. I would have liked to. There you go. He's got the one I drew for him the other day. So imagine that you've got this tic-tac-toe grid. It's 3 rows, it's 3 columns, and the 3 rows, the top one is marketing, the middle one is sales, and the bottom one is customer service. Those are the 3 elements where you are going to be in contact with customers or potential customers in some fashion. And what the one-page marketing plan allows is for you to think about the whole thing, as I said before, at a 30,000-foot level. It allows you to look at your entire sales process, your entire sales funnel, and identify where you're dropping the customer on the floor. That's really critical for any entrepreneur. You don't want to be letting your customers down. Customers are expensive. They're hard to come by. Depending on the market that you're looking at, some markets are what we call a blue ocean. There are not a lot of competitors out there, and so you're out there hunting for them, and it can be a long time before you find one. Others are what we call a red ocean, where there's lots of competitors in the space. They're fighting for those customers, and every customer that you get, you're taking from somebody else. All depends on what your particular situation is, but in both situations, customers are expensive either way. And you need to know, as Guru said, what your customer acquisition cost is. How much does it cost you to bring that customer in the door? And what kind of contribution margin are you going to get? In the angel business, we talk about this as unit economics. When you sell them something, how much of that revenue is going to drop to the bottom line and become profit for you? Or how quickly will you be able to amortize your fixed expenses and reach break even? That's what that financial analysis that Guru Dharam was showing you is going to tell you, right? So was there a question? No? Okay. So on the marketing part, let's talk about those first 3 boxes in the top row. The first one is called market. One of the things you need to do is identify what your market looks like. And Guru Dharam talked about total addressable market and accessible market and some of those kinds of things. Those are different ways of looking at that. But the bottom line is you got to know where your customers are coming from and how you can go about reaching them. Your market is going to be the people that you can solve a problem for. And so you need to figure out what that market looks like and what they do, where they go, where you're going to meet them. The second box is the message. In the message, you're going to decide what you can tell them that's going to pique their interest. And hopefully there's in that message some kind of a call to action. We'll get to this a little bit more in a minute, but the idea is that in response to this message, your customers, your potential customers, are going to do something that identifies them, that where they come to you and they give you an email address, or they give you a phone number, or they visit your website, or whatever it is they do. But in some fashion, you're going to generate some kind of an action. And some of the marketing metrics that we use are the cost per action. How much does it cost you to get that email address? How much does it cost you to get that click? How much does it cost to get you that subscription to your newsletter, or whatever the case may be? The third one is media. You're going to get your message to your market through some kind of a media. It could be social media, as Guru Dharam talked about. It could be print media. It could be a trade show. It could be any number of different things. That's going to differ depending on what your business is. But at the end of that process, by tackling your market with a message through a media, you're going to develop a lead. That's what the end result of the marketing process is. And essentially what you're doing is you're getting somebody to move from an unidentified entity that you know very little about to a specific individual that you can have a conversation with in some fashion. Okay, so you've got a lead. What do you do with it? Well, the first thing you have to do with that lead is capture it in some fashion. And this is more complicated than it looks, because leads tend to come in mass. They tend to come from different sources, and they tend to be highly duplicated. If you go to a trade show, you may be walking the floor and pick up a business card from somebody, and they may drop that same business card in your fishbowl. Or there may be somebody from the same organization who drops a business card in your fishbowl. There may be, you may send out an advertisement asking people to sign up for a free X, and you send another ad for a free Y, and somebody signs up for both of them. You need to track those leads, because you need to be able to track that back to the marketing to figure out which of your marketing paid off. But you also need to be able to start a conversation with those people after deduplifying all of this stuff. And you need to create an ongoing conversation that eventually will get them to pull the trigger and become a customer. So box 4 of our tic-tac-toe is lead capture. We need to capture enough information there and know where it came from that we can track it back and figure out which of our marketing efforts paid off and which ones didn't. Then once we have got that lead captured, we need to nurture that lead. That's box 5 in the center of the tic-tac-toe. And in that nurturing box, we need to pull them along, answer questions that they may have, overcome objections that they may have, help them see how we can ultimately solve their problem. And when we get to box 6, hopefully they're going to convert. Now, conversion has a lot of definitions in a lot of different sales literature. But the bottom line is that when somebody parts with their money, they become an initial customer. Now, oftentimes on that first transaction, there's a special process they need to go through. They need to be onboarded, or they need to be shepherded through the first sale and know what to expect. That may be very different than what you do with a second sale, or a third, or a fifth, or a 18th sale. But that process of conversion is an important one. When they part with their money, that's when they become a customer. The term custom The term customer comes from custom. And so hopefully that's going to be a repeat process over time. Now, there are some businesses where that isn't true. If you're selling people a once in a lifetime thing and that's all you do, I was going to say wedding rings, but that isn't true anymore. So say you're selling coffins, you're probably only going to be able to sell them one. But for most businesses, you want to get them to become repeat customers. So that begins the customer service relationship. Once that first order happens and they've said, yes, I want to pull the trigger, I want this thing. Box 7 is deliver a world-class customer experience. That world-class customer experience means that you've got to capture their order correctly. You've got to deliver their order correctly. You've got to be able to charge for it correctly. You've got to make sure that it gets delivered on time and deal with anything that happens there. That whole experience becomes their first assessment of how well you perform what you've promised to do. That customer experience is absolutely critical. Box 7, I'm sorry, that was box 7. Box 8, middle on the bottom row, is getting their repeat business, getting them to come back again. As we talked about before, if your customer orders once and then never comes back to you, your customer lifetime value is that first order. That's the only one you're ever going to get. If, on the other hand, you can get them to come back more frequently or to come back and order bigger next time, you can solve bigger problems for them that they already have. You can increase that repeat business as quickly as those customers feel comfortable with. And the ninth box is refer. If you can get your customers to refer you to other customers with a warm introduction from somebody that they trust who says, you know, I use these guys and they did a great job for me. I think you should do that too. Your chances of getting that customer are much better than getting a customer off the street. Your customer acquisition cost is going to be lower, and you're going to have a much better chance of spending a lot less time nurturing on the way to the conversion. So that is the one-page marketing plan in a nutshell. Now, why is that important for this group? Well, as I said, almost everything that Moqui and every other ERP system does right now is all around box 7. It's making sure that the customer has a good experience. And most of the time, we're focusing on that experience not from the customer's perspective, but from the company's perspective. But the company needs to see it from the customer's perspective in order to be effective. So there's a lot of area there for improvement. And some of the things that we probably ought to talk about is, in particular, the marketing piece. Now, I started thinking about, why don't ERP systems talk about this stuff? Well, there was a guy who ran a drugstore empire back in the early 1900s who was famous for saying, half my marketing money is wasted. Problem is, I don't know which half. And that is still true today. But today, we have much better tools, especially in the digital realm, to track whether our money is being effective or not. one of the tools that is very commonly used right now, and you guys have probably seen it, there's a thing called the UTM code. That's a urchin tracking module is what it stands for, but the urchin tracking module company eventually got absorbed by Google, and so Google uses the UTM codes in their Google Analytics stuff. In there, they track 5 elements: content, term, campaign, medium, and source. But if you think about it, a lot of that stuff is kind of duplicative, and it takes up a huge space in your URL. It would be possible to make that a lot shorter if you had an ID associated with the particular media that reached the customer, the item that they clicked on. To the extent you can nail that down and make that unique, then all of the other stuff in there, the content, the term, the campaign, the medium, the source, is all kind of implicit in that click. So there's an opportunity to clean up some of that, possibly, but that's kind of what the industry standard is doing. It's tracking those 5 elements and figuring out from that how effective your marketing money is being. Well, to map that onto the marketing elements of the one-page marketing plan, you've got market, you've got message, you've got media, but in many cases, you would want to catch a particular issue of that media in some way. For example, if you're running a TV ad, you want to know what time slot got the response, if you can. You want to know what the result of that ad was, how many people responded at that particular slot. If you're running a direct ad in the middle of the night or whatever, you want to know how many people responded to that one. That way you can compare one channel to another, you can do your A/B testing, and you can figure out what's working for you. On the message, there's a number of elements there that need to be tracked, but among other things, what's the cost of creating that message versus disseminating that message? When we talk about creating a print ad, for example, it costs you a graphic designer to create that print ad, and then you need to modify that print ad to the mechanical specifications of all of the different magazines that you're running in. And then you need to pay for the media placement of that ad in the different magazines that you're going to be running. You're going to be doing all of these kinds of things. But the interesting thing about this is that most of this stuff is currently being tracked by the marketing companies themselves, who are modifying that information so that it looks good to you as a media buyer. You can't trust that stuff. As a business owner, they're putting their best foot on it. And I'll give you an example when we talk about ROAS, but they're putting their best look on everything that comes to you. And they're siloing all of the data so that you can only look at their particular system, and they're going to show you, oh yeah, you've got great results on this. Look how many likes you got. Well, likes may not convert in any way, shape, or form to actual sales. Likes helps them. It doesn't help you. So these are some of the things that you need to be thinking about as you're doing this stuff. In addition, when you're contracting with media, in many cases, you're buying a package deal. You're buying 6 full-page ads over the next 12 months. Each of those ads is going to be a different iteration, and you're going to get different results with each of them. So you need to be able to divide up that one-time cost, which is already in your accounting system, over the number of ads that you get. Let's see. Results. Obviously, you need to be able to track the results. There are mechanisms in most of the sales processes that we use on e-commerce to track where the results came from. But in some cases, the result may be that somebody calls your 800 number and places an order. You need to have a mechanism whereby you can say, okay, where did you see us? Let's talk a little bit about ROAS. I had an advertising company and one of our advertising partners come to us and say, "Oh yeah, you guys have a 1.6 ROAS." That means that I'm sorry, ROAS is return on advertising spend. What that means is that for every dollar that we spend on advertising, we got $1.6 back in revenue. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, number one, that that's actually a really crappy ROAS, because you can compare to other vendors in the space and find out what the norms are. And by the way, the norms across all industries are not really good. But a 1.6, if you're getting $1.6 back for every dollar you're spending in advertising, remember where that advertising is in our first analysis. Is that a fixed or a variable expense? It's a fixed expense. That means that our contribution margin has to be greater than 40 cents on the dollar for us to make money at that rate. Does that make sense? So, ROAS is not a particularly good number to base on. And if you're using it, you need to make sure you know what your contribution margin is, or you're going to be losing money. So that's the marketing piece that I think most companies don't have a really good handle on right now. There are marketing softwares out there that we might be able to integrate with. Maybe that's one way to approach it. Maybe we build some simple tools into Moqui that could help us with that. But if we can use Moqui to increase our revenues rather than decrease our expenses, we have a much more compelling sales scenario to give to executives like me. On the sales side, in many cases, what they really need there is just some simple CRM tools. I think a lot of that stuff is already there in Moqui right now. In some cases, it may need to be cleaned up a little bit. In some cases, we may need to walk through some simple scenarios with them where they can understand how that can help their sales guys be more effective as they're calling on customers. But particularly in the service area, I think a lot of the service line can actually be built in. Moqui already does transactional emails to let people know when their product is being shipped and hopefully maybe when it's being delivered, for example. Well, what if we followed up and asked them some basic survey questions like, what was your experience with our product? Did it get there on time? Did it meet your expectations? How did it work for you? Would you like to fill out a customer survey, a review? There's lots of things that we could be doing as part of that transactional process that I think could make Moqui a very powerful sales tool, particularly in encouraging return sales and referrals that I don't think most of us are really thinking about right now. those are the main areas that I wanted to cover today. My thought here is more to encourage us to think about how Moqui can be a valuable sales tool as well as a valuable operational tool, because the leverage is so much better if we can help customers solve some of these sales types problems that they deal with. Questions?
Yeah, it's interesting, Matt. Like, I guess you mentioned a couple things, like the so follow-up emails would be a good tool. There's some parts of the data model for tracking things like marketing campaigns, but we haven't really built out much in terms of screens or automation around that, or contact lists from like mass marketing emails, or even follow-up emails like you're talking about. The kind of scheduled maybe based on other existing events like delivery of a package like you're talking about, or delivery of a shipment. Yeah. Are those sort of kind of the main things you think of? Or because I guess getting into the like EOS, I mean, you
EOS is another
could
animal.
kinda,
We could do a whole presentation on that.
yeah.
I think that one probably maps pretty well onto a lot of the project management stuff that is in Moqui. But I think we need to think through how that mapping works. But in terms of bang for the buck, I would be implementing the sales stuff first, because the sooner we can demonstrate value to a customer, and particularly if that's in the form of increased sales, that gets people's attention.
Yeah, and that's where I guess follow-up is the goal. There is customer retention, but I guess follow-up emails could also encourage referrals, like including, I mean, and maybe a lot of that comes down to the design of particular emails, like the shipment notice and the delivery confirmation, or follow-up on delivery, like include promo codes or mention other products they might be interested in, or I guess that sort of thing. I guess is kind of
Yeah, absolutely. And there's other things that we can do that Dib talks in box 7 about delivering a world-class experience, for example.
Mm-hmm.
One example where we fell down on the job was we shipped a package. It might even be, no, we shipped a package, and we sent the customer a tracking number, sent them the shipment confirmation, but the package got to Las Vegas and fell off the back of a truck or something. I don't know what happened, but had we had in place an automated process that looked at the outgoing packages and tracked whether they were making progress toward their delivery, then we could have been all over that when it stopped in Las Vegas for several days. And we could have said, no, let's air freight a package out instead, because obviously that one got lost, right? That allows us to be proactive about how we treat our customers. And automation could have helped hugely there. We didn't even recognize the need there until they called us and said, it's been 3 weeks. Where's my bloody package? Well, by that point, they're pissed off. We had an opportunity to go out of our way and say, hey, we've been tracking your package and it seems like it disappeared. Let us overnight a package to you. They would have looked at us like we were delivery gods. They didn't, because we didn't have that information. So
Yeah, that's an interesting. I think we worked on that at one point, but it's kind of complicated to implement.
it is.
If I remember right, there's a report that shows the kind of shipping exceptions, like things that are delayed or that go into a status that relying on data coming back from Shippo. But we did have some of that feed, and then you'd have to set it up. So I guess this is where some of these things require a lot of knowledge of Moqui too, because that report exists, and it's on a screen where you can set up an automated email that'll send you an email whenever there is something on that report to show, like whenever there are shipping exceptions, and then that could be sent to certain people. But I guess even that takes a lot of, I don't know, it's almost like we need a huge checklist even for the functionality that exists of like all this stuff to do. Which would be kind of interesting. I mean, kind of looking at some of these priorities and what has the most impact in different parts of this, and then how to go about it with what exists, or identifying gaps that that could be filled. Like some of it might be things that we could help with in Moqui, like with better out of the box delivery notification emails, for example, some placeholders for things that so people remember that when they customize those emails for their business and stylize them and personalize it for their logo and everything. But yeah, I guess it would come down to like a big checklist of these are things to make sure you get set up, and decide who's going to be responsible for shipping exceptions and who's going to be responsible for checking on these certain follow-up things, and maybe it's automated task creation too, so certain people get things on their task list automatically when, now we need to follow up with this customer, or now we need to take care of this, or that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's interesting.
Some of it comes from best practices, some of it comes from what the expectations are in your particular industry. There's a lot of stuff that goes in here. But I think a lot of it, there's kind of some standards. The UTM stuff, for example, all was developed since Silverstone developed his models. So it's not surprising that he didn't say anything about it when he was writing in 1990 about tracking what web marketing is effective or not effective. But expanding that to the larger world and saying, okay, we can do that in the digital world, but can't we also track it in a print ad, for example? You can put a QR code on a print ad, and if you have those UTM tracking devices, you can track that just the same way you would a click through on a digital ad.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can work on this in the hackathon. Ironically, we're all part of a community, and maybe that community needs
30 minutes is all we need.
the Moqui community itself needs to market itself better. And the Moqui community itself could be the company that we kind of like focus on these tools, because it's a digital product or like event based. There's a lot less risk, and we already know the people that we're selling to, so it's kind of easier in a way. We all have a stake in it. We're all owners. Yeah. Anyways, just food for thought. Like,
good idea.
We can run ads on.
We can run ads, run emails.
We can
make
run
revenue.
ads.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
No,
So you want consulting services? We can drum up.
we have various extensions we've done to Moqui. Some of them are internal, some of them are soon to be published components to follow the Moqui model. We can run ads on our own components selling to the other members of the community. Kind of, so those are the products that are being sold.
We can have another
make a whole self-referential system here.
Another product is
figure it
become
out.
a Moqui developer. Like,
Yeah.
he needs developers, so we just need to make a market for Moqui developers and start selling people on
Onboarding
becoming Moqui
process.
developers.
We can really throw out the term.
Love that.
Yeah, like active recruiting.
Active recruiting and training, and
Right.
deliver that
It's
world
open
class,
source. You
become
can
a
work on it at
developer
home in
experience.
your spare
Yeah, I mean,
time.
that's very
That's it.
real.
One thing that comes to mind is how many of us, so I guess Matt, working with you, there have been various marketing objectives that a lot that we never really got to. But some things we worked on here and there over time, but a lot we didn't get to. And I'm wondering how many others, either for their own operations or for clients they're working with, have marketing objectives that we could collaborate on, or if that's even an area where we need to find fresh meat that needs it.
These are all possibilities. I don't know. It'd be interesting to run a survey against our existing client base and see if these are problems that they need to see solved.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt,
Yeah.
just want to kind of make sure I captured the categories correctly. I generally captured the three areas that you identified as maybe weaknesses are tracking of marketing activity, simple CRM tools, and then what I initially wrote down is just like feedback loop, but that's that whole like after the sale, staying in touch with the customer, being proactive, those kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
Those are the three big buckets.
Well, yeah, and those are basically the 3 rows of the one-page marketing plan, right? You've got the marketing, which is where you're trying to get unidentified potential clients to become identified potential clients, that is leads. Sorry, I'm fighting that cold still. The second one is sales, where you're taking an identified lead and you're trying to nurture them along to convert them as a client. And the third one is, okay, let's give them a world-class onboarding experience and then repeat that through the customer service level. So yeah, those are the 3 big buckets.
I like the idea of making this part of a hackathon. That could be interesting.
That'd be fun.
I think, I mean, as you were asking the questions around like, other people that might have needs on like on the marketing tracking, things like that. There's got to be, I'm sure there's a generic set of functionality that would make sense, from both the data model perspective and also, screens and functionality. I think there's an element of that varies by either industry or maybe more appropriately, like a lot of businesses are very funnel driven, and the top of the funnel can be very big, so they need to manage a lot of volume of those leads that you described. Versus, I mean, if I use myself as an example, a very kind of boutique consultancy, like I only need a couple of leads at a time, really,
Right.
to turn it into business. But that's more on the kind of professional services industry. It's not about volume, really.
Yeah.
Quality. But being able to track even something as simple as an example of what I showed earlier of like putting a product out on, one of these marketplaces would be great.
Right.
to be able to track interest that way.
I think, David, like you're talking about dog fooding the contractor workflow in the tool. Like if we were dog fooding the recruitment aspect in Moqui, like that we're actually, hey, when you sign up on Moqui.org as a developer or as a user, it's in Moqui, that even the website itself is Moqui.
First step, figure out how to add a field to the party screen using Screen Extend. And then you have to go through all the steps and get approved on that. And now you're a Moqui developer. That's one of the tasks that you have to do.
Oh, like a training.
Yeah, training thing.
I mean, yeah, it's an interesting, like the Moqui website is running on Moqui right now, like Moqui.org is. And so we could certainly build screens where we have kind of a directory of developers and companies using it and stuff, and some kind of marketing or encouraging referrals and that sort of thing around it. Yeah, a lot of that could certainly be built, kind of fostering the community and those tools. I guess, yeah, we've talked about a few different contexts, even like Vince was talking about there's a big difference between when you're selling products where you have a high volume of customers and you need to automate a lot of these marketing and sales efforts, and versus more well, I guess, Matt, even in your business, like you sell to large volume, but or like like a lot of individual customers who buy little things, but then you also sell wholesale, so you kind of need both, like manual sales sorts of tools where you keep up with leads, and you actually have people watching individual leads and prospects and so on.
Yeah, in a multi-channel or an omni-channel context, there are some customers that you're never going to use an automated tool with. You know, they're an Amazon, or they're a vitamin shop, or whoever they may be, but in an e-commerce setting, you want to automate as many of those tools as possible, yet still have the ability for them to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I'm having a problem with X, Y, or Z," and keep that local touch as much as possible. But
yeah, kind of. And I guess that's where, like, automation around exceptions that bring it to the attention of people who need it, so they can intervene and make it a better experience, right?
I was really intrigued by what Guru Dharam said about giving prospective developers a test. That felt like something that might be really interesting to explore as part of this this training development kind of program. You know, if we start developers on that path and give them a little early success in seeing how it can be done, that might be interesting.
Reason I mentioned Screen Extend is, in the past, when we've ever had to add a feature to Moqui, we go modify the upstream files wherever they are. Well, that's a maintenance headache. But using Screen Extend allows you to hold on to that in your own personal component, which is much easier to fit in with the rest of the ecosystem. It still means you have to learn the XML, still means the Groovy, and it still means the data model, which are all very important. But it's like one concrete high-level target to aim for.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Love it.
This is a total side note, but one learning lesson from that testing process is don't have the applicants submit their component in a public GitHub repo. And all the other applicants just search GitHub for it and copy that solution.
Yeah.
And this happened actually it happened a lot.
I see a
So
lot
then
of
we
those
changed
kinds of
it. So we
questions
changed the
on
test.
Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
How do I do this?
Yeah.
And
People started copying the exact component. We just said, no, you copy this. You're not
Yeah.
who we're looking for. You're smart, but not smart enough.
Yeah. You're smart, but you cheat just a bit too much.
Yeah.
I spent half
Too
of
late.
my day Googling on how to do something.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Should we start the fireside chat, or any structure to it? We don't have a fire here, so.
Good start.
Why don't we take a quick break, and then and then come back and chat for a little bit, and I guess I should stop the recording now. So
You guys haven't implemented the halt and catch fire